welcome to our Hotseat webinar called BPM and the Agentic Emergence. My name is Jay Hammerlinson. I'm the Chief Evangelist for Eris, and I'm joined by my friend, colleague, and man about town, Mr. Dominic Batterhagen. Dominic, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling very good. Thanks a lot. How are you feeling?
I'm doing great. Honestly, it's been hot out there. Everyone is enjoying, hot BPM summer. So are we going to start that term today? Uh, and now it's time to cool down with a sweet drink and a little bit of agentic AI and how we can make that come to life with the power of BPM. Now, greetings to everyone from around the world who are joining us. I see some people putting their names and their locations in the chat. That chat is a fantastic resource all throughout this webinar to let us know where you're from, what you're looking for, and asking questions along the way. So if you type your question in the chat, we can highlight that question and also your name to all the other participants to see what insights you have on the things we're talking about today and what you'd like to know more about from our expert, Mr. Dominic Federhagen. So, with no further ado, welcome to BPM and the Agentic Experience. We're going to go through a bunch of things you might need to know about Agentic AI, about how BPM interacts with it, how we can see a collective solution, where we think this is going, and how we address that. I mean, of course, you're here in particular with Eris. But before we get started from all this, listen, Dominic, there's a lot of confusion out there about agentic AI. There's a lot of requests that are being levied on teams to somehow come up with a solution around agentic AI, these seemingly overnight. Tell me a little bit more about the pressures you're seeing for companies to invest in that agentic AI, either internally or coming from externally, like partner and stakeholder and shareholder expectations. And what kind of benefits are those companies and the people who manage them being told that they can expect to receive from an investment in agentic AI?
Absolutely. A very, very good question. Also, to get started with basically the discussion about agentic AI and also later on processes on BPM. Because if you open up LinkedIn nowadays, at least I see agents all over the place.
Oh,
Also, if you look at the AI newsletters, for instance, they're also all are about agents. If you're looking at new product launches from the popular AI companies that we are all working with, probably every day, you see that agent is a big, big topic. Also, maturing the technology towards agent. So I think it's a very good time actually to ask what can agents do in an organization. If you look basically who influences change typically within companies, so the big strategy consulting firms, just taking the McKinseys or the BCGs of this world. So they all have actually a very consistent messaging that agents have a very, very big impact on efficiency, on productivity gains, on taking burden from processes, from people basically in certain areas. So there is a big, big pressure in the market actually to pick that up. And I just listened yesterday to a podcast. It's actually more some kind of a IT nerdy, a bit more developer driven podcast. Not saying developers are nerds. That's not what I want to say. Actually, the podcast is even called From Nerdistan. So actually, they say from a developer perspective that basically all CEOs in IT companies, non-IT companies, the financial service industry ask actually, yeah, can't you implement agents? And not just today or tomorrow, but yesterday. It's basically a hot topic, and I think that's also a big reason and reflection as well why we have so many people in the hot seat webinar today.
Yeah, well, that's people being expected. Like that's now the expectation. It's like, we say, let's look at this sort of the hype cycle of different technologies and the expectations before they become standard offerings. We've seen this growing and growing and growing. Also, I think with the emergence of AI, I talked about this on a podcast that I was on actually, where it feels like this is a very commercially available product, even to end users, maybe before enterprises, which is a very interesting sort of cycle of awareness and acceptance where ChatGPT and the like have been available to end users, and now you're scaling them up and turning around different types of AI. We'll talk about that in a second. And now expecting companies to adopt them as mechanisms of automation.
Absolutely.
And we generate benefits that these strategy consulting firms, these IT firms that are supporting the implementation of technologies, what are they claiming you'll get from agentic AI?
Definitely would say it's the biggest is actually the productivity gains. where it's really a big driver actually to make sure that, yeah, processes flow seamless in time and quality and cost, increasing customer satisfaction as well. But if you also look at the different pieces of technology, for instance, actually more anticipating what processes can do, actually getting rid of this repetitive tasks which might be in place as well. So there are actually, depending on use cases, many different aspects that can help with the agents and processes.
Yeah. Productivity gains. And I also understand, besides you operating faster, you can operate with a different kind of workforce. I mean, we talk about you moving from a human workforce to a hybrid and human and agent workforce, which obviously has very different cost burden as a result of that. There's a lot of promises out there. But before we address those promises, and I would argue address the kind of guardrails you'll need to make sure those promises are realizable, let's first define some of the terms, because I think the other thing about agentic AI is that people, oh, there's a lot of people claiming to be an expert, but they don't necessarily know exactly what it is. So I know we prepared a slide here to go through a little bit of the difference between Gen AI and agentic AI and give people sort of a view of things. So I'd love it if you could explain what we're about to show people on the page here, the difference here between Gen AI and agentic AI, why this is so important.
It's important because also the differences actually are not that clear. So if you now look as of today, for instance, at Amazon, search for a new book, search for books about agents, you see actually everything around that area is pretty new. It's not a top of, for sure, agents in the AI space are discussed since a long time, but especially with the chat GPTs, with large language models, with the also what you said, the accessibility on a, yeah, personal use level first, and then introducing this type of technology. We've actually seen a lot of different projects being kicked off. So talking to customers who already started this journey with what can a ChatGPT like or ChatGPT technology do in their organization. Typically started actually from this Gen AI perspective, which is much more about content, multimodal content, images, text, actually performing a certain task, but very reactive. So you ask it something and you get a response basically. And I'll give you an example. It's actually from my personal life. So 2 weeks ago, I actually, with my daughter, created some invite cards for her ninth birthday. And no surprise, I used generative AI actually to support me with that because I could prompt ChatGPT about how this card should look like, what type of image I would like to have, what type of birthday party it is actually doing, and combining basically image processing, image generation with text and with a natural language prompt against the system for a particular task. And I was purely interested in generating this piece of an output, supporting me with that. You see also similar activities as well. If you look at the co-pilots, if you look at the team session, you run actually a transcript in the background, and you would like actually out of the transcript, which is, yeah, saying basically or putting down into words what everybody has said on paper, and getting that into some kind of a format that you can work with for meeting minutes, for action items. This is a typical generative AI task, which is basically empowered by the large language models which run in the background. But if you now look one step further, and I give you again the example from my personal life. So it's good to have these invites for the birthday, but in the end, there are many more tasks which needs to be performed in order to organize the birthday party, to maybe book a slot where we would like to have the birthday party. Now, actually being able to hand that task over to the agent, not by saying this is what you have to do first, second, third, we're talking about it a bit later, but giving it an objective, giving it a goal, talking about the outcome which is expected at the end of the day, like, dear agent, please make sure that I can celebrate a certain birthday party with the certain conditions, and giving that to the agent, having the agent performing this task independently, autonomously, also running to certain level decisions on their own. That's the big difference, and also the big majority that comes actually from pure content generation, generating something, to really executing tasks in a much more autonomous thinking way. And from my perspective as well, it shifts a lot from actually being used as a tool towards taking over a role. So, like I said, taking maybe my role when it comes to organizing this birthday party and then doing all the stuff which is needed to succeed in the end.
Mhm.
So it's very much focusing as well on the process piece of it, not just on a piece of input or a piece of output, which is generated on a process, but really making sure that the whole chain of activities are actually executed at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that. This is sort of a moving from a get me to do a specific task to I want you to achieve an outcome and you get agency, agentic, to be able to determine how that outcome is to be achieved and to learn and grow. I mean, it's the intention is to be iterative, right? So you're learning your own best practices, you're finding what's work, you're getting feedback along the way. And that's sort of the idea is that this agentic system, this agentic approach will by its very nature improve over time, which is a great capability if you can pull it off. And that's the other thing about this, Dom. And I think that I've heard so many people talking about agentic this, agentic that. They're making these big promises, and the promises are cheap. You can say whatever you want. How many people have actually implemented agentic AI and seen that value realized? Do we have any like actual use cases? Or is right now this all just like a theoretical pipe dream and hoping that when it gets to implementation, it actually achieves the goal people had set out for it?
Yeah. From my perspective, it's both. So because it's in the end, it's a journey towards a bigger objective. And when we talk, or when I talk basically to organizations, asking them about their use cases, I really see the different spots that they have identified in terms of use cases. So there's a very hot spot always when it comes actually to customer interaction, when it comes to incident management, as an example, or if there's, for instance, this, by the way, use case that has been shared by a strategy consulting firm when it comes to credit demands actually and requests being sent. And typically in the past, somebody having reviewing this type of information, requesting more information, then performing that in a very manual manner, then sending actually approval in the end or some requests towards the customer again. This is a typical case that we see as a pattern very often, where then also at the end of the chain, a human in the loop is being put again because you don't trust yet fully the agent, what they are doing. But I see this as a big, big spot. However, from my perspective, you just all have to remind we are with 2025. So we are actually working with what is out there in terms of technology. And if you really seen actually how fast the technology, take again ChatGPT as an example, how fast the different large language model versions have been put into the market and what type of additional use cases have been made possible through new technology, I really encourage to not think of this use case is appropriate, this use case is not appropriate. From my perspective, it's just a matter of time until many different use cases can benefit from agents and what agents can do. But if you look at technology as of today, for sure, you have to ask where to start. So, as I said, this customer support request incidents, maybe you already have a very good database with master responses or with certain rules in place that can help the agent to decide or to prepare decisions the right manner. This is a very typical spot that we see.
I can appreciate that very much. And we were getting some interesting comments in here. There's a someone saying that this agentic AI is an old wine but a new bottle. I like. I mean, this is just another mechanism of automation, but there is a new type of sophistication to this. And I think that that iterative learning approach that removes some of the business expertise required to get that feedback, to understand its implications, to be able to re-engineer as a result of that, to test new scenarios, like that whole cycle of improvement can be vastly, vastly improved in terms of shortcutting time, in terms of giving more reliability. Like there are lots of promises that will make this wine even sweeter, but there is a lot of guardrails that need to be put in place to make this actually work. And that's the question that people are asking this: does agentic AI kill the need for process management? And this once again, I'm going to pull up another question here from our Q&A because I think it's really interesting. Goes along with that from SEMA. What happens to business analysts and business process consultants when agentic AI is making some of the day-to-day decisions on
Mm,
how parts of the process need to work to get to the outcome.
mm,
And you have a fantastic slide for this, so I want to just go straight to that because I think it really does start to talk about where people are not only necessary but more necessary than ever to set these guide rails on how people should work in the world of agentic. Tell
mm,
me a little bit that takeover and where the human being and the process expertise
mm,
gets more value as a result of this technology's
mm,
implementation.
mm. I think first of all, for sure, process automation is absolutely nothing new. So we're working on that since a long time. We've seen different technologies entering the market. So a few years back, we talked a lot about RPA as an example. So really having through rules, bots performing the tasks of people. And now we talk all about AI agents. We talk about basically AI agents empowered by the large language models. You can just from my perspective, like an analogy, just have in mind these are like little brains, these large language models, which empower actually based on data which was used for the training of those large language models to do something that fits your purpose. And from my perspective, you might have heard that saying already some time ago. If you automate a bad process, it's still a bad process. So
Oh yeah.
if you just take that just as a second, so there will always be a new type of technology that helps you to do some further type of automation. Maybe you have 5% automation in your process. Maybe you have 100% automation in your process. But you already see I'm talking about in your process because the process in the end is the way how you look at the value creation. So that's the bigger objective. So just assuming that we're still on this planet for a very long time and have companies actually doing service and product creation for other customers actually, and that we have supply chains in place, you still have to imagine actually that this whole value creation happens in a certain way. And you have to have an understanding, actually, not just on one side, how it is supposed to be. You also have to, yeah, have some regulations in place because there are some constraints that you need to consider. And from my perspective, the agents are digital workforce. Piece of a digital workforce which acts a bit more autonomous or much more autonomous in the future than actually, typical developed technology, the bots, for instance, could do in the past is having a lot of rules in the background to do some decisions. So this is now a bit more freedom of choice, a bit more autonomy as well. But still, you just have to imagine everything needs to be orchestrated in the end in order to serve the bigger purpose of the value creation, which is the orchestration of the different processes. And if you again think a bit further, maybe in the future there are managers having actually people working for them. You have to work with them, you have to orchestrate them, you have to manage the collaboration, and you have the agents. And people, again, have agents as well themselves that they need to orchestrate for the bigger objective as well. So it all basically back comes down to the question how do you orchestrate the different steps empowered by technology in order to create the value at the end? So, from my perspective, it's not a question of either human workforce or have the digital
I like this a lot.
how to manage the collaboration.
One of the things that I care about a lot of that is thinking about the word context. The idea behind implementing an automation tool, and once again, agentic AI is like a lot of other automation tools, for the purpose of creating value to the organization. That value is only valuable in context. I actually have an expression I really like to use that everything has currency, and that currency sometimes is dollars, sometimes it's in minutes and hours, seconds, milliseconds, sometimes it's in
Mhm,
customer satisfaction. So, what is valuable is really important to define and refine and hold true. So, the organizational context plays such a huge role in defining the parameters of what you're going to automate. And with agentic AI, that's no different. In fact, quite the opposite. You need more than ever guardrails that are driven by business expertise and understanding, by strategy alignment, by processes to be able to put guardrails and constraints on regulatory obligations or the data protection and privacy, customer confidence. Those are things that the human beings that power the direction of the company set control, manage, evolve, and disseminate. That's not possible if it's 100% agentic AI. In fact, the opposite. The people who work in that agentic context are more valuable than ever. I really truly do believe that. And we talk about this a lot in different contexts. And particularly, I think about this in how do you shape agentic AI to meet your needs? And we talked before about this idea, how do we train the workers we're using, not just human workers, but the AI workers that we're using to be effective at the tasks we set forth for them or the outcomes we ask them to achieve. And Dom, you have this really great visualization that I want to pull up again and sort of talk through, because an AI agent actually has a lot of components around it that we want to talk to. And when we think about how this is affected by process, remember we're talking about BPM and the journey and the agentic AI emergence. Let's talk about where process falls into this. So walk me through this graphic, and then let's talk about where process plays the biggest role.
Yeah. Absolutely. Maybe we have one more slide. Is it possible that you get 2 slides back?
Oh,
Because it's actually starting a bit with the evolution. I would like to have everybody have an understanding of the high level concept. What is an agent and what it isn't, or what does it take in order to get the agent up and running? You just have to look at the market. So if you look as of today, and if you see actually, yeah, maybe you are yourself actually involved in agent development, so you have access to certain baseline technology. So maybe this comes from a certain vendor. You're working in with the ERP system as an example, and they are saying, yeah, they have agents, which is nice. Or actually, you start from scratch and you're working with a platform vendor and develop your own agents, which is also nice. But you have some kind of a off-the-shelf technology. So actually, there's some kind of a general world knowledge within the large language model, within the baseline technology, which is behind this agent, but it has no clue about your organization, about your specifics, who is the human in the loop, which role, what type of constraints need to be considered, what type of data you expect at the end of the day. And I just had a call with a customer who said, yeah, but in the process, I have the definition of done as my end event in my process. And I need to tell the agent later on actually what it is supposed to be doing. So if you look again at that slide, actually starting from off the shelf, and you first have to make it working. So typically, this is what's happening within many organizations right now, that they are testing, that they're doing their first prototypes. Maybe it's already in place for certain smaller use cases in place. So they've configured it, and this agent there are running. So they have a certain status actually, and they know the business requirements. They know what needs to be done in technical perspective, have access to the APIs to be up and running. But in the end, the ultimate objective is to make agents productive. And in order to get there, actually, you have to make sure that the agent is fully understanding the context that they're working on. So we'll come to that in a second. You have to have the feedback loops in place because processes are continuously evolving. So you have to adjust actually the agents as well. Processes might evolve as new regulation in place, or maybe you have found a spot that you would like to improve. So this doesn't go away. It doesn't go away because now agents are a bit smarter actually to run autonomous decisions. You still have to have a very, very good understanding of your business processes and get this type of information up and running to the agent. Maybe now we can jump to the slide that you just had before. And if you are not in this whole agent configuration space, maybe this is new to you, but you just have to understand actually in order to make an agent up and running, regardless with what technology you're using, you typically give this agent a goal, a task. So you have to tell it actually what the agent is supposed to do. And surprise, surprise, this is information that you've put into your processes. The same applies also to instructions, actually. So, what type of role is supposed to be taken over as well? I take it's not a business example, but I take again the example with organizing the birthday party. Yeah, you are now the father of a 9-year-old kid, and you're supposed actually to run a birthday party and would like to do the following A, B, C, D, E, the business requirements, which typically is information that you put into the processes. What do you expect at the end of the day? Then actually agents can't do everything themselves. They actually interact with applications, with other tools, or with other agents as well. So this whole orchestration is something which also needs to be managed. And again, surprise, surprise, if the bigger objective is the process execution, the goal, the different tasks, then the tools is something which also comes from the information which is being put into the processes with your applications that are typically being used, with the APIs that you use in order to access the applications. Data. Without data, you can't run a business process with agents because you need to have access to maybe structured data from the ERP system, from the CRM system, maybe unstructured data, the emails. Like again, this incident management example with the customer request. So it's maybe more than an unstructured database as well, or actually having access to learnings to log a file information coming from process mining as an example. And I think the tipping point is what you just showed up there. The process plays really a very important role in many of these different aspects as well. So what would you do as of today? Yeah, probably you would ask either the experts, how are you doing the process today? And then you put this type of information into your first agent implementation. But if you look now basically at agent implementation at scale, we definitely see that the process information that you might have already or that you would like to have in order to orchestrate agents to people process flows or maybe agent to agent process flows, you definitely see that the process plays a very important role in many different pieces here. And one thing that I forgot to mention. So from my perspective, having agents up and running is not a Wild West. So maybe if you're in your private life, if you test agents, I also have a nice example here. Can talk about that a bit later, maybe. But in a corporate environment, you actually have to do something in a certain way because there might be auditors that actually are asking you, have you done, are you in control of your business processes? Are you in control of the outcomes? Do you have the right controls in place in order to make sure that you don't run into risks? So you can't imagine how important these guardrails, these governance processes play an important role as well. Because from my perspective, there's some kind of a some kind of a limit that you also have to give to agents in order to make sure that they don't run wild. So if you
Yeah.
research a bit in the agentic space, you find that from Gen AI we know the word hallucination. Also read in the chat, actually agents or technology AI can make mistakes. Absolutely. Because it doesn't have the 100% truth in place. So that's, from my perspective, the tipping point as well, also when it comes to the business process reality. So you have to have an understanding on what you expect at the end of the day as guardrails. You have to make sure that you actually monitor between as is and the to be on a continuous basis as well. Processes are for sure, it's a no-brainer. So it plays a very important role in that context.
And that was a great question from Mark, though, that you picked up on there. Who's accountable if an AI agent fails or makes mistakes? And that's a great question. There's a lot of litigation left to happen about
Yeah.
the accountability and responsibility. But I would say if you are asking that question, you're already thinking, is it me? And if you're thinking, is it me? It very well might be you. Because if you're controlling the process and you're responsible for training the AI worker to do their job right, giving them the guardrails to make sure they don't violate compliance requirements, regulatory obligations, they fall out of the parameters, they introduce bias. If you're already thinking that you're doing that or you should be doing that, and it still doesn't work, that's something that you failed at a process level to address or a guide rail level to address. And that's something that's going to take some control. That's going to take access to information. Somebody asked a great question about the access to data in this sort of unprecedented time. I think that there's a lot that you can do as a process expert, as a business expert, in order to properly set the parameters for your agentic AI powered by your process and architecture. And that's also falling into, I think, Dominic, you have these rules, these 7 rules that I wanted to walk through today about how you can, or the guidelines, 7 guidelines on how you can best implement agentic AI powered by BPM.
Yeah.
And I'd love to walk through those rules with you. In fact, actually, I'm going to call up the slide for it because I happen to like how they look. But they call there are 7 principles. And the first one is something that I've been talking about this whole time, and I can wax a little more poetic about it. But it's the word context, right?
Yeah.
AI is
Yeah.
nothing without the right context. And I love that on your slide. Tell me about the context we are providing to AI through process and architecture.
Mm. I think it's a very important question because we've been talking about it all the time already. Basically, in a webinar, and basically, by the way, it's from my perspective not rules, maybe some lessons learned, some considerations in order to make agents work for processes. Also based on the reflections I've done, also with the conversations I have with customers. And right now, I typically see that there are many organizations diving deep into the specific use cases that have identified first for agents, which is good. So because it's actually it starts small and then grow large, and then making sure that later on you can scale based on the lessons learned as well. But I really would like to encourage everybody to really think of this bigger value creation, also being a bit more brave and a bit more bold actually, to look at processes that couldn't be automated before. And yeah, taking the process information as well as the instructions, as the goal, as the objective, and also with the piece of information, which matters a lot within a process, not just generating an outcome at the end of a process, but also what type of tools are needed, what type of data is needed, what are the data sources, and to use this contextual information to you can take the analogy to people. So if you hire somebody actually from the market, human workforce, you have to onboard them. So you have to tell them, this is your organization. We, by the way, call our intranet this way. This is the travel system, and this travel system has maybe the following regulations in place. And you typically have this type of information that you give to people and operating procedures, and you make sure that you get them up productive as well. You have to do something similar for the agents as well. So without this type of information, take again this off the shelf example. Yeah, it's off the shelf technology and it can't do the job. It needs to be made working. And from my perspective, the key point here is with processes, with process management, with the people, you taking care of processes all the day. You've established a source of truth as a knowledge base about what is the backbone of the organization, what is expected at the end of the day, how do you do the value creation, not just for the auditor and to check at the end of the day for your compliance purposes, but also to make sure that you have an understanding how the different dots in your organizations are connected. So this
Yeah.
is really something key from my perspective to have really the right context handed over and powered by processes in order to make agents up and running.
Yeah, you should be using the same words that I love here, which is that AI is kind of like a human work. It's an AI worker. You want to enable them. And this data, this context is actually super relevant for human workers. I mean, if you don't have this already set out, how in the world are people figuring out how to do their jobs? Well, guess what? The AI agents need the exact same kind of thing. They need the right context to do the right job. The second is talking about processes and process currency. We really want our agents to be driving forward the right kind of business for the right kind of business we want to do. Tell me about how keeping information and keeping processes current is really important in making AI effective.
Yeah. But also a very important aspect. It's actually being discussed since a long, long time already. So that the BPM, the single source of truth, the processes with the value creation, the definitions on how you want to run your organization as well is, and from my perspective, it's a bit like the maps of your GPS. It actually guides the people in their everyday business. And the big analogy here, from my perspective, is how do you run your business in the right way with an outdated map in place? So if you have people actually executing the process according to operating procedures which are outdated, you run into risks. You run into compliance problems as well. You run into performance problems as well. People might be not productive and doing what they are expected. Same applies to agents as well. And I think there are right now different approaches that I also see when it comes to agents. So just heard as one example, freezing agents in a certain manner. And when the process changes, updating agents as well might be one approach. Or the other approach might be actually like the GPS in your car. You have always up-to-date information about what is maybe the traffic road closure, what type of change process you have implemented as well, what type of systems are maybe offline at this point in time, but crucial to the process, how to deal with that type of change in your business process execution. So I really recommend to make sure that you always have access in a very dynamic manner to information and to also know, not just think, also pattern I see. Yeah, let's take the processes once, let's now implement the agents, and then the job is done. That's from my perspective a big, big mistake because organizations evolve, changes might happen. There might be mergers and acquisition. There's actually post M&A transformation as well. Processes are still being standardized. Application systems are being modernized. So there always needs to be a current understanding on how you do the value creation, not just for the human workforce. They call it the standard operating procedures and the access to the process portal. Same also to the agents. So agents must have access to process information
Absolutely.
like the GPS guidance. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that we try to look for in sort of setting this like enterprise standard knowledge warehouse that you have that is always up to date with the latest information that you can share with a larger context, whether or not it's be AI agents or human workers or the organization in general, being able to align things end to end. And just to move to the next point here, you talk about 0 to 100% working. What do you do to help set expectations so that your agents can be fairly judged on whether or not they're achieving the outcomes you're looking for?
Yeah. So what I wanted to say with that basically is take the perspective of the business and not of the technology. Because we are all so enthusiastic about AI and we look at what AI can do and try to do more of it because technology somehow allows it. But at the end of the day, you use the technology in order to serve a business purpose. And the processes are actually the means to get an understanding on what you would like to achieve at the end of the day. So the business process outcome is what you would like to have at the end of the day in place. That just encourage as well to take the perspective of the business, to take the KPIs, to take the PPIs, and to look from this angle at what the agents can do and not just purely at this single task you've given to an agent. Maybe then talking about accuracy, maybe talking about performance, being so fast. But from my perspective, you definitely have to have the bigger end to end perspective from the business purpose, from the value creation, from the process perspective.
That's a great statement. I love it. I'm definitely gonna clip that one and put it in a preview for this webinar. Yeah, judge it by its business outcomes, not by its tech. And talk about the process value. So you're measuring agent value based off of the value that it achieves in executing its processes. Is that what you're saying here?
So basically two. So they are very close. This two. So the one is for sure. If you look at how much value do agents bring to your organization, look at actually what they are doing for your processes, and actually how much of automation, how much of reduced errors you might have in your processes. As an example, so take actually the perspective of the coverage of your processes as well, but also look at the different angles of the processes. So is it time saved? Might be. Is it cost? Is it maybe quality? Is it compliance? So it's very related to what I just said before. So the agent value is, from my perspective, not a technology thing to play now with technology. If you also look at the whole reports from McKinsey as an example, they take very strongly the words processes and process outcome and process value in all of their communication. And if I look at the BPM space, in the past years, I've never seen actually this big push as well, also from this strategy consulting area towards the value of process generation that these agents and agent technology can do, as we can perceive right now in the market. So I definitely think it's a very, very important time that I think we will talk about it in a second, that the process people talk to the AI people.
Yeah, and by the way, you had some guts mentioning quality in there because we have questions over here like, if you had the same input, same data and instructions, would you get the same outcome or would the answer be different? And that's one of those questions like, is the nature of AI and the way that it learns leading to a risk in quality as a result of the way that it perceives the need for to answer questions or solve problems.
Yeah. I think it's important. I believe all of you are in having a assumption that you understand actually what ChatGPT is doing, what large language model are doing to the high level. You actually know it's not hard rules actually. And say you give an input and you get 100% always the same output. However, if you ask that question that way, you risk running into the issue of thinking of, but that's an AI problem. Just think of, again, the question if you get a question from your peer on a Monday morning, would you give 100% the same response to your peer? Like you give maybe mid of week or maybe end of the week, most probably you would come to the conclusion that also human workforce doesn't react that way. So they actually have maybe more information in place. They maybe um, have a bad day. For sure, AI doesn't have a bad day, but there's some probabilities baked into the technology as well, which doesn't make it just executing rules in a very predefined manner. So, oh, I think we lost JM. So let's keep the conversation. But actually, there is some kind of a likeliness that you will not hit exactly the same output. I think that's also a very important, yeah, reason why you have to have an understanding of the processes in place, because the processes and the guardrails and the compliance that you would like to achieve at the end of the day and the outcome, which is defined by the process, is something which comes from you. What important? I think the next one is actually about scaling up. So when it comes actually to thinking of introducing technology for further process automation, for further value creation. And again, there's a certain risk that it might be charming to test technology and to dive them deep into one certain use case. So you definitely need to look at your whole process landscape and ask actually yourself, where can you help with scaling up? Because using agents at scale means actually making them work for more processes or making them work for more activities in your processes. So this is something which is key as well. Scaling up means looking at further coverage, at further enterprise impact, and you can identify that through the lens of your processes. So then one more, it's a bit related to the scaling. Again, if you look at technology from a pure singular perspective, it's if you basically ask what can an agent do, you tend to look at a certain task. So you might silo yourself in terms of the thinking, this task is perfect, like I said before. So as of today, agents might work very well for this incident management process as an example, having access to unstructured information and thinking this is the perfect spot that you can work with agents. But again, you as the process experts, we are all doing this process thinking because we would like to eliminate the silos in organization. We would like to make sure that for the bigger value creation of an organization, we connect the dots in a very meaningful manner. And this is the same as well when it now comes to agents. And coming back to the question that we had just before, will the need for the business process experts be less? Making sure that actually agents and AI technology is not just a silo technology, but something which happens in a very connected manner through the lens of the processes is really what, creates the value at the end. Perhaps a good time for the Q&A. That's a good proposal. I think just one last thing that I would like to actually pick up. So when I nowadays talk to customers and actually ask them, actually, what are you doing with agents as of today? So I see really different customers on a different maturity level. So I see customers actually who are very fast, so I actually have a lot of budgets already allocated to agent development, already identifying the spots as well, what agents can do. And there are many who are still working on the generative AI technology. So introducing chatbots, ChatGPT like technology, either with this type of technology in the background or maybe with implementing own home baked solutions as well. But actually, um, yeah, I also see some kind of a missing connectivity between the BPM community on the one side and the AI community on the other side. If you just think again of what we just discussed today in this hot seat webinar as well, that it's all about making agents work for the business purpose, for the business process purpose. The tipping point here as well is that both communities, the AI community working on the agents and the BPM community working on what the agents are supposed to do at the end, that they talk to each other and that they have a continuous exchange as well. So I really would like to encourage everybody here as well to make sure that you're reaching out into your organizations and connecting with the different people. Hi, JM. So just talking about the different communities being connected to each other. So that this is something which is really crucial in order to make agents work at the end of the day and to make it work for your business processes, for the processes that you're taking care of and that you will take care of with the human workforce and with the digital workforce. So just proceeded a bit.
Here, and sorry, my friend. It's that's the idea. Technology is always a friend and a foe at the same
Yeah.
time, but we're trying to make it work as much as we can. Let's talk about where we fit into the picture here, because as you might imagine, this is where the conversation around Eris comes up. Because you've been listening to a lot about how agentic AI and BPM work together, but in particular, the platform that Dominic and I both work for, Eris, really comes together to make this come to life. And so explain to me, and that's actually a great question by one of our members of our audience. Tell me how the components of Eris specifically support the development, the implementation, the control and management of agentic AI.
Yeah. It's an absolutely important question. So just look again from the left-hand side. So starting from configured agents, getting to productive agents. So, and thinking again of that agents are not acting in a wild, wild west. They have to have some configurations in place. They have to have some instructions. They have to take a role. They have access to tools as well. You have to connect actually the information to each other. So what we're discussing and having and seeing as well in the market as well, that actually monitoring, discovering processes, monitoring the execution of agents as well through our process mining is something which is very, very key in order to make sure that you have an understanding on what the agents did at the end and what they might have missed in the end. And we already talked about it. So that actually having some always up to date information about the maps, about supposed way of working, not just for human workforce, but also for the agents. So having your ARIS repository as a knowledge graph with handing over information to the agents is something which we see much, much more coming. Also, a lot of discussions are coming out of that area. What type of additional information are supposed to be put into the process models? So many customers actually approaching us saying, yeah, but we have operating procedures. We would like to get them structured, hand them over, then later on updating them on a continuous basis. So this is something which is quite key as well. And from my perspective, too, if it comes to finding out what is the potential for agents. So looking at our process simulation, simulating what an agent can do for the process in the end, what type of considerations you should consider in your process before you roll it out, before you make it available into the organization, is something which is, from my perspective, really crucial. So also happy that we soon will launch an updated process simulation as well. So you can really look forward to that, empowered by us.
Yeah, I like this idea. I've been hearing about this and talking about this a lot. This idea that Eris is a platform with an enterprise knowledge warehouse. Like as you run processes, either through automation, conventional automation, RPA, agentic AI, those logs become inputs to sort of give you a sense of what's actually happening. And then your process experts become these shepherds and shapers. They say what's important and what should it look like. And then You help design for implementation, whether that be through automation or the guardrails that we need and the expectations that we're looking to set out for a tool like Agentic AI. And that enterprise knowledge, that warehouse becomes a source and a control for everything along the way. Uh, once again, a tool like Eris is so important, particularly Eris, is so important to be able to shape that conversation, to set the context, to involve a community, to be able to make sure you're monitoring and getting feedback, predicting before you implement changes to your AI. These capabilities aren't achievable without a tool like that. And I really appreciate the ability for our platform here to make that come to life so that you can live your agentic future with BPM as a shepherd and a guide. Now that's the thing that we wanted to sort of end off with here is how to get started, how to make it happen. And that's the thing that I really wanted to sort of end before we get into our just general Q&A on is this one last picture here from Dominic and I, which is let's get to started, right? So what is our process opportunity and how can we make this happen? So tell me about the seven boxes that go around here. What are we trying to achieve and how are we going to use BPM to get there?
Mm. Yeah, so basically, the biggest challenge that every organization has is how to get started and how to find out now what is the perfect process to get started. We already talked about the use case, but as I said as well, so I'm a strong believer that the technology will mature fast and that if you might, as of today, maybe think this type of process is not yet appropriate for agent execution, it might be already tomorrow. They give you one example before I talk about that slide as well. So I also wrote a blog article about that. So I let the ChatGPT agent basically sold some pre-owned stuff myself that I actually wanted to sell on a platform as well. And I just gave it the task, please do it. And it did it completely for me. I really could observe how the different processes have been executed step by step by step by step. I was involved in certain steps as well. So there's really a big wow effect in finding out what an agent can do already as of today. And this was fully off the shelf technology without having a lot of different instructions being put into that. So I had some guidelines I gave to it, but it actually performed the job very well. And now, if I put myself into your shoes, basically, asking, yeah, what can agents do? For sure, you should look at repetitive task execution because that's for sure is something which is quite typical when it comes to automation as well. It might also be maybe more rule-based automation, but repetition is something, and you have to have some monitoring, some measurement in place in order to find out for sure what are typical repetitive tasks typically. Rule-based task execution, it might sound as something that you typically would do more with coding, maybe more with a bot as well in place. But I think on the long run, the technologies also will merge. So you will not decide so much: is it not a one, is it the agent, or is it the bot, or is it some automation that you're implementing with some different technology? Definitely look at your processes if you have rules in place that can help you actually to instruct the agents as well. Decision heavy task execution, complex processes. Are there humans in the loop? What about the gateways? What about the decisions in your processes as well? Is this something that you maybe, if the process is not too risky, would like to test and find out if an agent can do in the future? Or is it maybe about knowledge awareness? Human in loop takes decisions because they have a lot of knowledge as well. They have access to certain knowledge bases. They typically then do decisions on maybe send out this response, send out that response as well. This might also be something that you can identify in your processes through the information that you're having already. Unstructured input. Like I said before, are there maybe images? Are there maybe documents being sent without a specific form in place, a specific data in place, maybe emails being sent to a certain email address or support inbox? That's a typical case that we're seeing here as well. Dynamic adaptive processes. So processes change. So maybe the autonomy of an agent can help you to faster time to value with your process changes as well than typical rule-based implementations, where you have to put all the data in, all the change of rules again into the system and test cycle as well. So this is something that I strongly recommend as well. For sure, yes, structured problems, structured processes, structured outputs. closes the loop as well here. So just giving you some food for thought to look at your repository, your process landscape, maybe run some queries against your database, and finding out actually where there might be a bigger spot.
I love it. Well, this is great information. We have 5 minutes left, and Dominic, I got 5 questions for you. By the way, not just 5 questions. There's a million questions, but I want to first and foremost go with a good friend of ours, friend of the show, man about town, Tanguy Petra, of course. Good question from him. Wouldn't it be a risk to have some kind of agent that can discover your process based on your system usage, identify manual gaps and silos, or replacing process mining for process patterns? To me, Tanguy, that sounds a little bit like process mining. So like we're trying to extract from that log some representation of the business process that the agent has decided to perform. Well, that sounds fantastic to me. I'd love to be able to use that as a driver and a populator for my enterprise knowledge warehouse. That sounds great to me. What do you think, Dominic? How does it sit with you?
Yeah, so from my perspective, it's also the question, are we talking about one-time discovery or are we talking about continuous monitoring? So it's also a big question from my perspective. Take an example, I just read it last week, so that there were the first agents who actually could document and reconstruct legacy systems based on working with this legacy system, clicking through a tool. Maybe for this discovery of a legacy system, a legacy process on a one-time manner, there might be an approach to actually take data from the agents. That might be the case. So, however, and now there is a however. So I just asked today a customer about the question: how do you make sure that the agent doesn't lie? So there's still the question about, is it right information? Have you observed it from an independent instance perspective as well? And so there might be maybe an observation agent in place doing this type of track and tracing and truth checks as well, or some process mining technology doing this as well. On the long run, you definitely have to make sure that you can control this value creation activity on a continuous basis and make sure that you have trace information from the agents being put into logical manner of value creation, which is process mining, which is process discovery. So I think it depends a bit on the use cases if you perceive it as a risk. So as I still see the technology giving relevant data for value creation, I don't think that there will be a replacement, but really teaming up a collaboration.
Sounds good. A quick question, although maybe a preview in here from Tim. Anything about the model context protocol you want to tell us on today's call?
Yeah. So it's actually not a roadmap call today, but for sure this is something that we're looking into as well. And at some point in time, we might expose more information about that.
I love it. Then a great question here from Goberton. Today's AI agents need humans to train them initially, but in the long run, is human intervention even needed to train AI, or will they just learn by themselves?
Yeah, I think it's again a bit the black or white question from my perspective. So you still have to think of, if you have some kind of a smart technology, which is maybe that smart like people, still have to instruct them and still assuming that they are acting in a certain context for a certain purpose, you still have to give data. You still have to make sure that it works the way how you are supposed to run your business.
Context is everything, my friends.
Absolutely.
Context is everything for today's webinar. Thank you so much for attending.